Hi everyone, we have a packed house for today's webinar. Exciting. Hopefully we get about 30, so 2 more will hopefully join us. I'd like to welcome you all to our USDA Fog Abatement Training brought to you by the Western States Alliance, a program of the Pacific Northwest Pollution Prevention Resource Center, known as PPRC. This webinar is number 1 of Module 2, implementation of a fog program. I did not drink enough coffee this morning. My name is Krista. I'm the Communications Manager for PPRC, and I'm going to be your moderator. So some brief background about who we are. We were founded in 1991 to provide pollution prevention information and technical assistance training to small businesses, communities, and industrial facilities. And the thing we do want to highlight is our rapid response service. So if you have any questions about the content of this webinar, or maybe you have a different pollution prevention question in the field of wastewater, we'd be happy to do some research for you guys. It's free and we put in about 4 to 8 hours. So definitely visit our website to find out more about that service. The program hosting today's webinar, again, is the Western States Alliance, known as WSA. And our membership is mostly people from the Pacific Northwest, though, like I said last week, we are recruiting all around the country. So if you know someone in Florida or Maine or even Puerto Rico or Guam, we'd love to have them on our newsletter, especially since we know that, each community faces fats, oils, and grease very differently. And so the more people we have on our newsletter, the more we're able to learn about the problems. And also that helps our funders get you guys what you need. So the other thing we want to highlight is our annual FOG forum, which is traditionally held in the spring. And before I forget again, our pre-treatment workshop, which is going to be held in November, the first 2 weeks from 8 to about 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The CEUs that we distribute are for Oregon. However, if you need CEUs, we're happy to assist you in getting CEUs. It's just we're not going to apply on our end, but we'd be happy to help you apply. And again, this webinar is funded by a grant from the USDA's Rural Utility Services, and we have 3 speakers today: Clayton Brown, WSA Program Manager, Ed Gilmore, WSA Technical Program Manager, and Ken Graham, WSA Industrial Outreach Manager. So housekeeping notes, I sent everyone last week your core hours. I did revise Mondays to reflect how you guys do it. I initially put 0.2, but it's actually 2 core hours. And I sent everyone their updated core hour certificates. If you didn't get it, just email me and I'd be happy to make you yours. Then finally, please take that needs assessment survey that I directed you all to when you registered, if you haven't done so already. And please do use the question box in the GoToWebinar little panel. It's immediately, I think, for you guys under attendees, and we really appreciate your questions, and it helps let us know what you guys are facing in your communities. So I think that's about it. So you can take it away, Clayton.
Thank you, Krista. Like Krista said, the workshop is being brought to you courtesy of a U.S. Department of Agriculture Technical Assistance and Training grant, and they typically focus these grants on smaller rural communities, which we tried to do in our outreach. And it sounds like we have a really good group here today. So feel free to interrupt with your questions and comments. Typically, we give these workshops in person, in a classroom setting, and it's been a real challenge for us presenters to do this from our office or our home offices and not be in front of a classroom with the folks actually there where we can we can bug you guys. So and maybe I should say, hey, Ed, can you mute?
Oh, sorry.
And I'll get even with you later. My name's Clayton Brown. I have 10 years of experience in construction, heavy construction, utility construction, putting in sewer and water lines, dirt work, streets, subdivision development, underground utilities. I worked my way through college doing that. My wife kids me about being on the 10-year plan when I was in college. It didn't really take me that long, but it seemed like it to her. I have a bachelor's degree in biology from Portland State University and a master's in business administration from George Fox University. Prior to coming to work for PPRC, I spent 30 years at an industrial or a stormwater and wastewater utility in Washington County, Oregon, called Clean Water Services. And we provided service to the urbanized area of the county, 12 member cities and some unincorporated area that was in between the cities. We had about, well, when I retired, there were over 660,000 people in the county. And we also had one of the largest Intel fabrication facilities in the world in our county. So it was a fun place to work. I was the source control manager for the sewer district. So I managed the industrial pretreatment program, the fog abatement and pollution prevention, and the industrial stormwater programs. So we had a lot of work. I was the person that was given the responsibility to develop and implement the fog program for Washington County. And a lot of my mistakes, I'm going to try and make sure that you folks understand things not to do when you're developing a fog program, or important things to do so that you don't get blindsided like I did. And I'll probably tell some stories about that. Fortunately for me, both Ed Gilmore and Ken Grimm were not involved in some of the cease and desist orders that several of us municipalities ended up with from our building codes division at the state level, because we did things we couldn't do. And we'll talk about that under the jurisdictional discussion later on this morning. The folks on the left are either presenters or have been presenters in these workshops, or they provided information or done peer review on the presentations. And then the associations on the right, I want to give kudos to. They have backed us in our application for grants. And they also provide grant match for some of the work that we're doing, which for these federal grants, you have to be able to demonstrate that you can match the grant funds with either time or material from other sources. So it's been a pleasure to work with these folks. Years ago, Ed did a presentation and somebody was asking about food service facilities. So Ed put this cute slide together with a bunch of chain restaurants so that people know these are facilities. I've seen the same or similar ones in Maine, in North and South Carolina, in New Jersey, in Kansas and Nebraska. So these are some of the organizations, the franchises that we work with, and we'll tell you some of the background information and also some of the feedback we've gotten from working with these folks. It's pretty important when you're working on your stakeholder information exchange. Like I said earlier, we do encourage open discussion. If you pose a question or a comment, Krista's been really good about interrupting us speakers so that we can address the question. If we can't actually answer it, you may get feedback from some of your peers that have had a better opportunity to look at the issue that you're bringing up. So just keep that in mind. Information that we're going to cover today. The first bullet point is you may already have a FOG program. You may have a FOG program already in place Please be patient with us because we're hoping that we can give you some ideas you may be able to implement that can improve your FOG program. I'm going to be going over legal authority, inventory, and survey information because without good legal authority, that's your foundation for your FOG program. We're going to talk about food service establishments, stakeholders, grease pumpers. We're going to cover some of this in more depth on Wednesday, but we're going to at least introduce these issues. We're going to talk more about FOG triage. We introduced that during the business case presentation last week. We're going to talk more about it today and Wednesday. Ken's going to talk about best practices, and Ed will go over some training and effective pretreatment public outreach information near the end of this presentation. This is, again, the first half of the FOG program development or implementation piece. Next week, we get a whole bunch of pictures, so it'll be way more fun probably than listening to the talking heads today. With that, Ed, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it away. That is, if you might want to unmute.
Oh, Dad, I just have done that, and thank you. Well, I was so embarrassed that I had it unmuted. I didn't have it muted when I had a conversation here in the office, so I apologize to everyone. Now, I pushed the button, and I now have a green light. The introductions is basically the same as it was last week. That restaurant owner for a dozen years. I got my Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry from Portland State and industrial pretreatment. After that, I ended up getting a job as source control specialist at Clackamas County, and I was an industrial pretreatment person. And I part of my, obviously with managing the industrial discharge permits, but also the FOG program and also some P2 and also septic programs. One thing that most of these programs all had in one common, was the aroma associated with them. So it was something I've become very, very familiar with. And and from that, I just will go ahead and I became after I retired, I'm now a presenter here at Western States Alliance and having a pretty good time too. And once I learned how to push the button to mute or unmute. So, all right, let's go ahead. And next slide here is that the we kind of began this, and the first two webinars that we did last week was about building the business case, and now we're going to start taking those first steps in implementing, or probably in most of your cases, in improving your FOG program. And like I said, you may already have a program, and one of the reasons you probably had it because someone cared at one time, and they were concerned about FOG. And believe it or not, FOG is not a brand new issue. Up until about a half a dozen years ago, many municipalities had the resources and manpower to address FOG issues and the problems associated with FOG. But in the meantime, populations have grown, and probably more important, or probably more affected mostly, was the budgets. The budgets have gotten a whole lot smaller, and could be some other reasons that you already have a FOG program, or you do have a FOG program, is because you had sanitary sewer overflows. And when that happens, that's when the environmental issues pop up, and in addition to the major regulatory compliance issues. There's another reason you may have an increase in maintenance and operational costs in the collection system, or grease buildup at the treatment plant, or even at the pump stations, as we talked about last week. The other one that sometimes creeps into is the capacity. Is capacity an issue at your facility? And if capacity is an issue, is what can you do to reduce the inflow of the extra solids and extra BOD and TSS that comes to the plant? And sometimes FOG is addressing and helping to reduce capacity. But the important thing is to think about is, obviously now that you know that you have a program and or you think you're thinking about improving one, or if you haven't had a program and after you watched our first 2 webinars, you decided to go ahead and realize the need to go ahead and start one. But the most probable reason that you do have a FOG program is management. As management says that there's a need out there, and they also told you that was the case. And the fact that you're now improving the FOG program is definitely in your future. You need to know more about the desired outcomes. What are the desired outcomes that you want in improving or expanding your current FOG program? Something we've said before, and I'm going to read it again to you again, is that what you have is we want a data-driven FOG program, not an effort-driven program. And that's something that really hits home, and it's an important to know that is the data-driven program, not an effort-driven program. And by the way, that was Gary Christensen, the city of Seattle, his public works. He's the one that has really brought home this particular point. But part of that is part of having that data-driven program is that you need to understand from the doing that is that sometimes public health is a driver for your program, and part of that too is also the environmental concerns that are out there associated with it. And once again, is that it always comes down to, in developing your program, is knowing it always comes down to money. And also being cost effective is very important. Yeah. From the management perspective, they know that they need to comply with state and federal regulations. And of course, your management is probably correct because they know the feds and they know your local politicians. And believe me, they know what it's like to be out of compliance. Sanitary sewer overflows, yeah, is definitely one of the drivers. If sanitary sewer overflows was or is the driver for your FOG program, you need to know what outcomes you're looking for. What do you have to do to create those outcomes that you want? By the way, if this is the reason that you are having to improve or work on your FOG program, is that probably the regulators are out there. They're probably quite interested or quite involved in your plans, and they definitely want to see the results. And what you need to do is, obviously, the best way to do it to address those is to eliminate the SSOs. You need to reduce the number of them. Also, when you think about SSOs, they come in various many forms. One is the obvious, when the sewer overflows into the waterway. Then yeah, you definitely got a SSO. But the other is when a manhole pops up and sanitary sewer flows out into the street, and particularly if it's a street that people are driving by. Once again, it does definitely become a big issue. The other is when the sewer backs up into a home or a business, into someone's basement. That's definitely a sanitary sewer overflow. And once again, it depends upon who's looking at it. And some people in the municipality that I work for is that if the municipality had a plug in their line or something happened with one of their lines that caused these sanitary sewer to back up and consequently back into someone's home, then that was definitely a sanitary overflow, but it wasn't to a residence. And depending upon how bad it was or was not reported to the state. However, the city of Portland, they have the idea that anytime sanitary sewer backs up into someone's home and they know about it, it's then reported to the state. even when it happened because the individual homeowner's lateral was plugged and the sanitary sewer backed up into their basement or into their home. And they reported that to the state. And even though it had nothing to do with the utility, they still reported it. And the reason they did, because when that generally happens, often the first thing that people call is they call the utility and complain about the backup. And come to find out, it wasn't the utility, but it was the private individual, and so it took care of it. But there again, their idea is something we knew about it, it's something we should share. And once again, it just depends upon how your particular management reports SSOs. Well, once again, if fog was the cause of an SSO, whatever steps your utility takes to address them, you probably need to document and to address all the corrective action that you've been taking. And not only just what you have done to correct the SSO, but what do you plan on doing in the future? Infrastructure drivers, that definitely, they increase costs related to the fog. And yes, cost does seem to drive a lot of things. Dollars, it's amazing. The dollar item comes up in multiple discussions. Once again, fog is damaging your infrastructure. It's almost a no-brainer, But once again, the more damage the fog does to your infrastructure, it increases your maintenance cost. And sanitary sewer backups into private property, may or may not have to be reported to the state, like I said earlier. But they're still very expensive when fog is the municipality's fault. Most utilities don't track private systems, but once again, when the public sewer is involved, backups and overflows can, and most of the time, become a problem, not only for the homes, but also for the businesses involved. The first steps that you need to take in regarding infrastructure drivers is to document the line cleaning and the frequency. And once again, what is the cost that we talked about that last week too. What is the cost that relates to that cleaning of the fog out of the collection system? Also, identify your fog lines. Make sure that people know where the fog areas are, which lines need to be cleaned more often, and make sure it's mapped out. Also, identify the structural degradation that relates to fog, and talk about it. Here's an example where we had a restaurant that did a very poor job of maintaining the grease in their gravity grease interceptor, and it got to the point that ended up having taken a major enforcement action. But because they had damaged our sewer line outside of their facility, their interceptor was shot as well as their lateral. But in addition to that, they not only had to pay the penalty, but they also had to pay the cost of what it took us to repair our collection system, the damage they had caused. Once again, documenting those costs as related to fog. Once again, here we are again. We have regulators are a driver. They definitely are a driver for a fog program. Like I said earlier in this presentation, if regulation is the driver for your fog program, there's a lot of aspects of your program that's going to become under scrutiny. And if your permit, if your POTW permit is up for renewal, I guarantee you new conditions are going to be applied. Not only additional reporting, but record keeping for the SSOs. Also, you may actually require additional public notifications when you have an SSO. And once again, I think this is something that a lot of people don't end up doing or taking advantage of. And this is document the management and operational and or maintenance programs and make sure that they're up to par. It's not just the collection system, but it's also the management's operation and the maintenance programs. Make sure they're up to par. And if they're not, highlight what needs to be improved and to work on those improvements. Yeah, well, what are the, what are the outcomes and outputs for that regulatory driver? If the activities I've talked about in the previous slides have already come about, or that's already happened to you, I guarantee you that regulatory agency is probably addressing those issues right now. But here's the other: if you're afraid or concerned about the regulatory agency, once again, the answer is very simple, but it's also kind of more complicated too. The simple part is just comply with state and federal regulations. Don't have those SSOs related to fog. No illicit discharges to the storm system. Excuse me, illicit discharge of fog to the storm system. And once again, this is probably the more difficult one, but to reduce or have no restrictions in the collection system that have to do with solid or those viscous substances. And once again, no infrastructure deterioration or damage to the fog. And once again, if you're having it, make sure you document it. Now, here's that was the easy part, is no, 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 no. But the hard part now is your fog program. And if you need to expand it or fine tune it, it's time to start now. Or if you don't have one, it's time to implement that fog program. That particular last slide was a good segue into this one. What are the programmatic drivers? What always seems to be discussed every time you have a staff meeting, but particularly around budget time, is program cost, budget, or is it in the budget? Those issues always come up. And what they're concerned about is the program cost for inspections. Is it in the budget for a data management system? And is it also, what is the budget program cost for program oversight? That's inspections, data management, and oversight. What are the program costs for these items? But these are three very basic items, but they can be very expensive and budget busters. Once again, back to that data-driven program, not an effort-driven program. This is where it really can cause a budget buster. But if your fog, if your fog program can be a very cost-effective program, and the key to making it cost-effective is having good planning, triage, proper data management, and management buy-off at the highest levels. Let me repeat the good planning, triage, proper data management, and management buy-off at the highest level. All those are very crucial in having a cost-effective program. And they're not everything, but that's really the biggies. But there are some other items that you really need to address as your fog program grows, or if you're increasing the size of your program. Sooner or later, the sooner that you have the following items under control, the better off you'll be. One, you personally, it's best just to improve your skills and familiarize yourself with the different grease removal device brands. Find out what those GRDs out there and what are the different companies and what are the different brands out there. Just get to know what they are. Also, understand the cost effectiveness of the grease removal devices. Understand which ones are easy to clean out, harder to clean out, and just basically which ones are the most cost effective. And here's one that really, if you end up understanding the size versus maintenance frequency, that is a major asset. It's a major asset for the restaurant to understand the size of the GRD as regarding to maintenance frequency, but also the better that the size in conjunction with the maintenance frequency works for you and for the restaurant, it actually makes your job easier as a fog manager. The other is do it right the first time. When you go in, do an inspection, do it right. When you come up with a plan, do it right the first time. it makes your job a whole lot easier. Have clear expectations about the GRD. And this kind of goes back into that size versus maintenance frequency. If a restaurant's going to put in a small GRD, let them know they're going to have to pump that thing out every week or so. And it's going to cost them a whole lot more than increasing the size of that grease removal device. Have clear and consistent plumbing and building codes for your grease removal devices. Understand what they are, but making sure that they're clear and concise, something that's easily understandable. Have clear guidance and technical assistance. If somebody asks you, we've said this before, if someone asks you how, what you should do or what they could do or how could they improve their efficiency, or do they have any thoughts about different GRDs? Yeah, you've been there, you know what they're talking about. Share that information, but make sure make sure that you know that they know that you're not telling them what to do, but you're just sharing the information that you've had from other programs and what other people have told you. And the other is understand new construction versus retrofits. That can be a very big one, particularly if it's quite obvious. Everybody knows what a new construction is, but sometimes when a restaurant is doing a major renovation, is that new construction or is that just a retrofit? And if you really don't have a policy or understand the policy surrounding that, it's something that you should understand that maybe you don't know about it, or if your program doesn't have anything about it, is you should develop one or start the discussion of one. I've said this many a time here, just bring it up in your staff meeting, talk about it, and make sure other people understand that this is also a concern of yours or an interest of yours. And this is kind of a little out of most people's league, and but it's something you should just know about. It's once again, it's in the area of knowledge. Knowledge is a good thing. Understand ratepayer equity, and the reason that is important is municipalities often have different philosophies in regarding taxes, fees, and services, and what the expectations are. Sometimes municipalities believe that businesses should pay their own way. They cause an increase in cost. Whatever it takes to comply with the rules and regs, it's up to the business to pay for it. Other municipalities feel that businesses bring jobs to the community, and because jobs to the community is an asset, it's best that the utility customers, overall utility the ratepayers pay the cost for business. Whatever your municipality has, or whatever philosophy your municipality has, understand it, because I guarantee you at one point in time you're going to be out at a restaurant and they're going to complain to you about the costs, the fees, the taxes, something with the requirements. It's something to be associated with. So the more that you understand the philosophy of your utility, is kind of be the more you'll be able to answer or address that question. And once again, it's when people ask you questions and they get answers, may or may not like them, but they feel like they're being paid attention to and listened to. Once again, I'm just going to go through the slide here. It's just to kind of summarize all the things we've kind of talked about. Is that the important thing to do is to comply with state and federal regulations. And like I said, that is the easy part, I thought. But once again, if you don't have any fog-related SSOs, no illicit discharges to the storm system, no restrictions in your collection system as a result of viscous substances, and also in no infrastructure deterioration, you're in a darn good place. You have a pretty successful program. And once again, if you have all these items, like I said, you've got one good program. So I'm going to go at this point. I'm going to turn a polling slide over to get Krista's attention, and we're going to polling slide. And after we answer a couple of polling slides, I'm going to introduce you to Clayton. Go, Krista. It's all yours.
Does your city or utility have a formal fog program? Okay, I'm going to close it soon. Few more seconds. Okay.
Oh, wow.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
We're glad you're on this presentation. Let's
Yeah,
get to
really,
another.
I think that's probably one of the higher numbers we've seen.
Oh, yeah.
And for you folks out there, hopefully there's a bit of information out there for you, being presented to you that will give you some ideas and thoughts of how to take that first step. And once again, Ken's going to talk more about the support that we have for you guys. But and once again, I'm glad you guys are here today. Thank you, Krista.
Yeah, let's get to the next poll. How familiar are you with your city or utility sewer use ordinance? And in the question box, I'd love to hear, maybe you guys are just taking this for CEUs, but if any of your municipalities are thinking about starting a fog program, we'd love to hear, how you guys are thinking about getting it started. All right. Very across the board, but 50% said mostly familiar, which is good.
Well, this is for addressing those people who are mostly familiar with it, and also those of you who are not that very familiar with it. I guarantee you, every one of you in your sewer use ordinance have got a line or two that says that viscous solids or viscous substances are prohibited to be discharged to your collection system. This is a really a major line or major component of a lot of sewer use ordinances, and this opens the door for you wide. In fact, one municipality I know, they didn't have any fog regulations. There's a lot of things they didn't do special for fog. The one line that they used to start up their program and to run their program and to do a rather successful program is they utilized that one line in their sewer use ordinance that said no solid or viscous substances are prohibited. You know, solid and viscous substances are prohibited to be discharged to the collection system. Use that line, begin that discussion with your staff meeting, and that's another good way to start your fog program. And I like one time we were in program that I had, we were talking about expanding the rules, and the attorney we had really minimal rules to do for our fog program. But he said, yeah, if our minimal rules are working, go with it. We don't need to change anything until we are contested. If the only thing you have is that one line about solid and viscous substances, go with it. And if it presents a problem, then you need to change it. But there's your open entry to go in to start a fog program. Okay, thank you, Krista.
Yeah, thanks, guys. All right, you can take it away.
All right. With that note, I think I'm going to turn this over to, once I go, there we go, and I'm going to turn this over to Clayton. And once again, Clayton, you've got a sharing here. Let me share here. And yeah, beautiful little granddaughter there. There you go, Clayton. It's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Ed.
You welcome.
I've already introduced myself, so I think I'm going to jump over here to the the discussion about legal authority. Ed mentioned that a lot of sewer use ordinances have at least prohibited discharge standards. I worked with one small coastal community that had nothing in their sewer use ordinance except for the criteria for how to hook up to the sewer and payment of your utility fees. This was many years ago, Since then, that city has updated their sewer use ordinance because it turned into a tourist area, and the number of restaurants, they did have some old canneries along the waterfront that were closed, and then they were retrofit or remodeled to become condominiums on the top floor and restaurants and stores on the main floor. So that city has incorporated quite a bit of minimal pretreatment information into their sewer use ordinance now. At the time that I spoke with their public works director, he had no tools. So this is the foundation for any regulatory program. And I'll be right up front. One of the best model sewer use ordinances that I've looked at was one from Region 8, your area. I think Al Garcia and probably Kurt McCormick started it. Al Garcia, I think, finished it with help from the R8 PA folks. And it's one of the better ones that I've seen, and it's posted on our website, on the Western States Alliance website. It's one of the resources we have there. Region 10 has a model sewer use ordinance. The one that from Region 8 focused more on small communities that don't have to have an industrial pretreatment program. They're not mandated under federal code, but it gives you the framework that has these bullet points in it. The ability to condition or prohibit discharges that have the potential to cause problems with your collection or treatment system or pass through and affect your environment. Your ability to control non-domestic discharges, typically through a permit. Some small communities also use what's called an authorization letter, but it allows you to control what that non-residential facility is discharging to you. It allows the city to require periodic reports. And these are important even in communities that aren't required to have a pretreatment program, but perhaps you've got restaurants and dental offices and you want to get reports on the maintenance of the grease interceptor or the amalgam separator from your dentist. You can require those reports, and they're enforceable. They have to be submitted under this properly written code. You need to have the legal authority to go in and inspect non-domestic facilities. I'm going to throw something out there real quick. My first sewer use ordinance that we had in Washington County was actually written before I started work there. It stipulated that inspections would be done during normal business hours. And we found out that there were times where we had to go onto sites after hours to investigate issues of noncompliance. And we had to change our sewer use ordinance or risk being threatened with trespass. So just be aware of that. Also, your sewer use ordinance should allow you to include photographic and video evidence if you're taking enforcement action. Region 1, EPA Region 1 on the East Coast in New England, they have some specific language ideas for that. You also, if you incorporate best management practices, you need to be able to define how you can enforce those also. And Ken's going to talk more about best management practices, but if you require a restaurant to follow best practices in a permit or an authorization letter and don't have the ability to track those best practices or codify them or list them and do inspections and have reporting on them, it's really hard to enforce that. You also need to be able to take enforcement action for noncompliance. And there are many options for that, and I'll talk about that here in my next slide. So this is a sewer use ordinance that deals with non-residential or non-domestic facilities, as they're called in the federal code. So if you guys have any questions, pop those onto the screen and Krista can interrupt me. Otherwise, I'm going to jump into some enforcement options. Some small communities have existing municipal code, and they'll modify that existing code to allow the code enforcement officer or the peace officer to use that code to take enforcement action against food service establishments or restaurants. There's a small community, an island community up in Washington State. They used their nuisance code. They modified the nuisance code to allow their code enforcement officer to write tickets to restaurants that either contributed grease to the collection system, impacted their lift stations, or was discharging grease and exorbitant amounts into the collection system that impacted their treatment process. So that was their option for an enforcement action plan. There is guidance. In fact, we have EPA's Enforcement Response Plan guidance document posted on the Western States Alliance website. You can go pull that off and look at it. It's old, but the tools that are available are still the same ones that many municipalities use. Warning letters, escalating administrative penalties, and then compliance orders, show cause orders, consent orders, or hearings, compliance orders that specify what actions that a non-commercial or a commercial facility needs to follow to get back in compliance, and typically timelines that those and the steps that need to be taken, and a time frame that each one of those steps needs to be taken. Most compliance orders I've seen also require the commercial facility to submit progress reports on that compliance order, and typically these are enforced through the courts. So something to keep in mind. You do have a lot of options. In Washington County, our escalating administrative penalties were basically on a logarithmic scale. So the first penalty was like $50, and then the next one was, I don't know, it went up from there. So these are options that you need to have available and codified in an enforcement response plan, and then supported by your sewer use ordinance. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Oh my goodness, we have ringing chimes here. It's perfect timing. I want to talk a little bit about doing an inventory, or getting an inventory and doing the survey of your food service establishments. And when we first started our FOG program in Washington County, we linked up with the Washington County Department of Health because they licensed the restaurants in our county. One of the county sanitarians and the supervisor for the health department, or the manager, they gave us a big Excel spreadsheet that had all of the food service establishments in the county listed on it. We ended up having to have them sorted by zip code because we ended up with probably 2 or 3 pages of restaurants that were outside of the urbanized area. They were on septic tanks. They were far away from us, and we had no jurisdiction over those folks. The health department gave us the first list that we got when we first started doing our inventory, and it allowed us to start doing the physical survey work, the initial inspections out in the field. In the process of going out and doing our inspections, we found out that the grocery stores were licensed through the Department of Agriculture. The grocery stores and the little gas station stores that provide ready-to-eat meals, you take it out, your hot dogs and your breakfast wraps and those things that are in the big hot counter at the front of the store. The Department of Ag is who licenses those folks. So we had to go to the Department of Agriculture and get a list from them of the grocery stores and the small facilities that they licensed in Washington County, sort through those and do the same thing. We added those to our FSE list that we'd gotten from the health department. We expanded then and went into the school districts, met with the facility manager for each one of the school districts to find out. We needed to go in and do physical inspections on the school cafeterias. We ended up doing inspections in the retirement facilities. I'll give you an example. The town that I live in, not very big, but we have a very large Quaker church retirement community in Newberg, Oregon. And they provide 3 meals a day plus snacks to all the residents that live in the retirement community. So you retire, you move into Friendsview Manor, you no longer have to cook meals for yourself or your guests. The last time I heard, they were providing over 600 meals per setting, so 1,800 meals a day for their residents. And they were under a compliance order by the city of Newburgh to do a retrofit on their big commercial kitchen, because originally it was built with one sink connected to a small interceptor, basically a 2040 trap that was underneath the sink. And they were discharging large volumes of greasy wastewater during cleanup to a trunk line that ran right down a creek and went through a city park. So the potential was there for sanitary sewer overflows into the park. Retirement facilities, extended care facilities, your skilled nursing facilities, they provide meals for the residents. A lot of the folks that are in skilled nursing facilities come in after surgery or a stroke or heart attack. They're there to have 24/7 care during their recovery period. They're provided with meals. So those facilities need to be inspected and added to your inventory list. Correction facilities in Hillsboro, Oregon, which is the county seat for Washington County. The county jail, when they built the new county jail, they added a very large commercial kitchen bakery because they provided all of the baked goods for the Hillsboro School District and the county seat. So they were a commercial kitchen as well as providing meals for the inmates. And you need to be aware of those types of facilities. We have not just the county jail, but we have a state correction facility in Wilsonville and a federal facility in Sheridan, Oregon. So that's just well, that's basically in 2 counties that I've worked with here where I live. That doesn't count some of the other correction facilities across the state. The other thing that I don't even have on my list are churches that provide meals for the community. We have 2 churches in Newburgh, Oregon that provide meals. They alternate. So one provides meals on Tuesdays, the other provides meals on Thursdays. And there are times where they provide 300 to 400 meals for each one of those days. So especially during COVID, it's been really important. A lot of those church folks deliver meals to shut-ins also, but they're basically a commercial kitchen. So keep that in mind. Another one that's not on my list are, I don't know how many of you folks have mobile restaurants that go out into the community and provide meals for gatherings or construction sites, or you may have a food pod, what we call a food pod, which is a parking lot somewhere that's got 3 or 4 mobile restaurants in it, and they provide meals for the community there. Those mobile units are supposed to be supplied from a commissary. That commissary is supposed to be licensed by the health department. The commissary may not be at a restaurant. It may be in a commercial facility, and it may not advertise to anybody but the mobile vendors. So that's another item to try and determine if you have any of those in your community. So that's kind of it. Any questions on the inventory and survey work, pop it into the question screen. And I'm going to jump into another topic that's near and dear to my heart. Talk about stakeholders. We talked about this in the presentation last week, how important it is when you're doing your FOG program development, planning. It's important too when you do your implementation. You need to make sure that you've kept your food service establishments up to date on what you're doing and how you're going to implement your program. If you already have a FOG program in place, you need to make sure that your food service establishments are aware of the criteria that you've established and what their responsibilities are. Small businesses need to know what the regulatory structure is and what the requirements are. A lot of communities, a small business can come into the community and set up a restaurant. And if the city hasn't given them the criteria they need to meet to stay in compliance, they'll do their best, but they don't know what they need to do. Over and over, we've heard folks say, if you just tell me what to do, I'll do it, but I need to know, and I want it to be the same for me as it is for Joe down the street. So keep that in mind. Your building and plumbing officials, your plan reviewers, they need to know what the expectations are when they do a plan review on a new food service establishment. And they need to know, they need to have some information that they can give back to the owner of the restaurant. A lot, and Ed's going to talk about this in more detail, but a lot of building codes set a minimum bar, a really low bar. There's a minimum standard for a grease interceptor under the Uniform Plumbing Code. It's really weird because the Uniform Plumbing Code allows the owner or operator of the restaurant to designate which fixture is going to have greasy wastewater put in it, and then that fixture is the only one required to be protected. We've had issues where, like a specialty coffee shop will say we don't have grease, therefore we don't need an interceptor. If anyone has a requirement for their coffee shops to have grease interceptors, you know they do have grease. You know that interceptor is one foul mess when the pumper comes out to do service on it. So just keep that in mind. So your building and plumbing officials need to be kept in the loop. Your health inspectors, we're going to talk about some jurisdictional issues a little bit later here. I'll talk about those in a minute. But health inspectors are a key part of your team. They look at other stuff. They don't look at the drains, but if you work with them and you provide information to them, they can be your eyes and ears in the field. Some of the pictures that Ed's going to show on Wednesday were pictures that were issues that were reported by the county sanitarian in Washington County, and then we followed up with the fog inspector to do some kind of enforcement action. Stains on the floor around an interceptor. The health inspector happened to notice those, and he pointed it out and got our fog inspector to come in and check the interceptor, which had backed up. It hadn't actually gotten onto the floor yet or into the drains, but it had backed up enough to push out under the lid of the interceptor. So good to have those guys on your side of the fence. You're on your team. The pumpers, an integral part of your team members. They're probably out there in the field more than you are. They see more restaurants than you do, and they see issues that they need to, if you're working with your pumpers, they can bring those issues to your attention and you can deal with them as inspectors. Contractors, builders, architects. As I mentioned in another class, when Oregon changed the Oregon Plumbing Specialty Code in 2013, they moved from the old Uniform Plumbing Code to a code that requires all fixtures and drains in the kitchen and food service area of a food service establishment to be protected by a grease interceptor. All fixtures and drains, not just the 3-comp sink, but all fixtures and drains. That includes the mop sink, the floor drains, the hand wash sinks. There were a couple of exceptions in the rule, but most plumbers just ignored those because it made more sense to hook everything up to the interceptor. Well, we have restaurants who are they're franchise restaurants. Their headquarters are in places like Atlanta, Georgia, Wichita, Kansas. So we were still getting plans that did not meet the new plumbing code in 2013. They were still designed under the Uniform Plumbing Code, where one fixture had a grease interceptor. And so the plumbing officials had to notify the architect or the designer, the engineer that was working for that company, that they needed to bring their plans up to the current specs to meet the Oregon Plumbing Code. And that was an interesting endeavor. So you need to make sure that your contractors, builders, and architects are familiar with what you're doing with your fog program. landlords, property managers. Many restaurants are built on leased property. So the property owner is legally the person who's responsible for his tenants and for them to be in compliance, which I was surprised to learn from our legal counsel. It's important to know if you have a food service establishment that is built on leased property, who the property owner is. You need to have that in your database somewhere. Property managers can also be another ally. We had one large mall. This was back when Sears was still here. They were the anchor store in the mall, one of them. They just happened to have built the Sears store with a basement, and it was set right over the building sewer. The lowest point in the building sewer line was underneath the Sears store. There were restaurants upstream that did not have good fog protection, and periodically they would plug the building sewer between the outside of the Sears store and the city street where it hooked into the public system. And Sears basement would flood with sewage. And of course, Sears basement was where all the tools were, all of the washers and dryers, the vacuum cleaners, the lawnmowers, the yard equipment. It was a busy place. That was the place where all the guys went to hang out, you know. And when it had flooded with sewage, it was just miserable. So it was the property management company that came to the sewer district. And when we first started our fog program, we had meetings with property managers across the different shopping centers in Washington County. They came to us and asked, what could we help them work with their upstream tenants? So they're an ally that you need to have. And then the other folks to keep in the loop are in Oregon, it's the Department of Environmental Quality. In Washington State, it's the Department of Ecology, Idaho, DEQ. Whatever your state regulatory authority is for your water and wastewater, work with them, make sure that they know what you're doing. Your regional EPA folks, and then neighboring cities. It's really important to, when you're building this stakeholder list, to try your best to keep consistent regulations across multiple jurisdictions. You have franchise stores that are located in all kinds of jurisdictions in your area. It's important that you have the same standards, if possible, for each one of those so that there's not a lot of confusion. Well, Biscuits Cafe has a store in Tigard and in King City and in Wilsonville, but the rules are all different for each one of those cities. It's hard for the facility manager to keep up. Listen to your stakeholders. These folks are an integral part of your planning process and your implementation process. And they can either be allies or they can be the folks that stick in the spokes. And you don't want to be blindsided or have your city council be blindsided by somebody that has a vested interest in this whole fog program stuff that you didn't reach out to. So do your best. I've given you a list. Do your best to communicate and contact with those folks. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, and I'm going to talk just a bit about jurisdictional authority. I really am. Typically, there's 3 jurisdictions that you're one of 3. This is not counting the fire marshal's office. They get involved too, but we're going to talk specifically about the health department, public health. We're going to talk about the building department, the building official, and the plumbing inspectors. And we're going to talk about public works, the folks that are tasked with implementing and meeting the MPDES permit for the city or the municipality or the sewer district. Before I dive into this very deep, I want to open it up for a polling slide with Krista. So what do you got for us, Krista?
All righty. Are you familiar with your city or utilities FSC plan review process? Okay, almost everyone has voted, so I'm going to close it. All right. Interesting. Any comments?
Just kind of a reminder of the presentation we did last week. We talked about you actually save money in the long run if you become involved with your plan review process. It's money in the bank for you guys. So it not only makes you a better, more informed fog inspector, but you'll actually do a good service to you for your utility as well as the restaurants, the more involved you are. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Let's do another poll. Do you have a working relationship with any of the below? Okay, almost everyone has voted, so I'm gonna close it. That's a pretty high percentage for neither. Any comments, guys?
Clayton, I'm glad you showed the slides you did a little bit earlier to show the importance of this, having that relationship. It's good.
And I think maybe that'll change. Maybe if we came back next year and polled the same group, we would see more say both and less say neither, because it is important.
Okay.
All right, thanks, guys. You can take it away.
Okay. I did training in a small town in Northwest Washington on fog program development and industrial pretreatment program development. And we asked we were hired by the city to do the training. And so I was talking to the city manager and I said, can you please get the health department, your health department official at the meeting? And I'd also like to have your pretreatment folks and your stormwater program manager and your building officials. Come to find out that the health inspector had never met the city building official. They'd talked on the phone, they'd emailed stuff, but they had never sat down face to face and talked to each other. Now, mind you, the Public Works City Hall was only like 2 or 3 blocks from the county courthouse, but these two gentlemen had never even met. So they were glad that we brought them together for that meeting, because it did open the door for them to start working more closely together. Now, this is kind of the Cliff Notes version of a long presentation Jill Hoyinga put together. She's the pretreatment program manager for the city of the Dalles, Oregon, up on the Columbia River. She had worked extensively with code people because she did a lot of consulting and cross training with code enforcement and building officials and public works folks. And she was totally amazed that we had no idea how the jurisdictional authority stuff worked as pretreatment people. So she put a PowerPoint presentation together for us. We included it in the FOG program training we did 2 years ago. And it's online at Western States Alliance. You can go in there and you can pull that presentation down. It's a long one because she goes into a lot of detail about code and how codes are developed, and what different types of codes there are, and how the codes interact with one another. So the health department code and the pretreatment people and the building officials. But in a nutshell, here's what we have. The top triangle is the building official, your plumbing code folks. On the right lower part is public health folks, and on the left lower part are the pretreatment folks that operate under the MPDS permit and federal code. So let's kind of go through this. The center part is the area where we overlap. Common interest, protecting public health and safety. That is the area where the building official, the health department, and public works all have a key element in protecting public health. I'm going to say something here. The only ones that have in their code or in their mission to protect the environment are the public works folks. The health department has nothing about the environment, at least in my state, in their state code or in the federal health code. The building officials, there's nothing in their mission that requires them to provide protection for the environment. They're focused on public health and safety. So the only folks that have actually got codified direction, and I mean, it's in there, it's in the 40 CFR 403 regulations, that is part of the MPDS permit structure. The only ones that have that requirement in their code are the public works folks, pretreatment, public works, wastewater plant operators, the folks that deal with wastewater for the city. We're it. We're like the only defense against damage to the environment. And we have legal authority to take enforcement action when somebody damages the environment. Now, the health department and the building officials don't. Now I'm going to run through kind of a timeline here. So the first place that a new restaurant owner goes to get to start the process of putting his restaurant together is to the health department. He goes in and applies for a vendor's license, a restaurant license. Then he takes his building plans and he goes to the building department and he applies for a building permit. The public works folks do not deal with that person typically until water starts to leave his facility as he goes into operation. Okay? We don't have jurisdictional authority over that building until it begins to discharge wastewater. The health department and the building officials do. Now, where the building official is different than the rest of us is once that building official gives the permit to occupy the building, he is disconnected and has no more legal authority over that building. So even if something was put in backwards, it wasn't connected properly, if it was inspected and it was approved, let's say the interceptor was put in backwards or some builder, contractor substituted a septic tank in lieu of a gravity grease interceptor. If the building official approved the building for occupancy, that building official cannot then go back to the building owner and require him to change something, nor can he go after one of the plumbing contractors that put that interceptor in backwards. He does not have the legal authority to do that. Only the pretreatment people do. So I learned that the hard way when I kept trying to put pressure on our Washington County building officials to go back in and take enforcement action against a retirement community because they had not put in the proper interceptor that they had specified when they submitted their building plans. The building official finally said, Clayton, I can't do anything. We've already given them permit to occupy. I don't have the legal authority to go back in and require them to retrofit that. You do, but I don't. It was a hard lesson to learn. I wanted to have somebody else do that work, not me. The health department and the public works folks are going to follow that restaurant now until it closes. So we're the two authorities having jurisdiction that will follow the restaurant once it's opened until it closes its doors. The building official, once the building is open for occupancy, he's done. But the health department and public works folks, we continue to track that restaurant or that food service establishment through its life. An area where typically the health inspectors don't pay much attention is the drains, because in their opinion, once somebody pulls the plug on a 3-compartment sink, or once the dishwasher is drained and it's run through its disinfection cycle and the dishes are dry, the water goes down the drain. That's not a worry that they have. They have a huge concern for how food is handled, for how food is stored, for how raw products are stored in the restaurant, for the food handling safety, that people are washing their hands properly, that they're keeping their equipment at the right temperature. That's the place where they focus their attention. not on where the water goes after the plug is pulled. So keep that in mind. So this is kind of the way the jurisdictions work. In Oregon, the public works folks have absolutely no jurisdiction over what a builder puts into a building. That's the building official's jurisdiction. The health department defers everything to the building code when it comes to the structure of the facility itself. So I'm telling you this, I'm hoping that it will allow you to build better bridges with these other jurisdictions, but be aware of the limitations that they have and also the area of jurisdiction they have that does not overlap yours. So be aware of where the overlaps are and also where there are no overlaps, where you're the one that's going to take the lead, like with environmental protection. We had one issue where a restaurant, the grease interceptor plugged up, backed up into the restaurant. The restaurant owner called a maintenance company to come in and clean the restaurant floors so he could get back in business because the health department shut him down. He had the vendor come in. It was a commercial cleanup company. The closest drain that they could squeegee that sewage water was right out the back door where there was a catch basin in the low spot in the parking lot. That's a stormwater. That's an illicit discharge to stormwater. That's an environmental impact. We were the ones that had to take the lead on that, not the health department and not the building official. It was the public works folks. So you have to keep those jurisdictional issues in mind, figure them out in your area. Some communities are a little different than this, but just be aware of it and talk to your building official and your health department folks. Because like I said, they're your allies. They're also out in the field doing inspections. Maybe they don't overlap, but it will give you more eyes in the field to work with. So again, a list of your potential stakeholders and partners. These are the folks that you're going to partner with when you're working your FOG program. City officials, food service establishments, the pumpers, we talked about them. We're going to talk about them more on Wednesday. Other regulators kind of went through that today. Property owners and property management, consultants and contractors, school districts, hospitals, long-term care facilities. We had an issue in Washington County where we had a major trunk line that went through a wetland area. And on the hill above, it seems like they always build hospitals up on hills. I don't know how that is, but this is another hilly hospital story, not one that I told Ed or that Ed tells. The hospital did a remodel on their kitchen. We were not aware of it. The city building official was not aware of issues with protecting the fixtures and drains because it was right before the plumbing code changed. So the hospital put in a brand new kitchen. They just expanded their facility. They'd added a couple hundred beds, I think, to the hospital, to one of the hospital wings. So the number of meals they were going to produce was larger. They expanded their cafeteria and added a cafe and a coffee shop. About 4 months later, we had a sanitary sewer overflow in the wetland area that was downstream from the hospital. And the upshot of the enforcement action that came out of that, this was carried out by folks that were way above me in the hierarchy of the sewer district. The hospital had to do a retrofit on their brand new, just remodeled cafeteria and cafes in the restaurant and their coffee shop and install properly designed and sized grease interceptors. They also had to pay for the cleanup in the wetland, which was rather extensive and expensive. So, boy, you want to make sure you're working with these folks when they're in the design stage, because fixing something after it's in the ground is pretty expensive. I always have to. This is one of my slides that I show just to increase the confusion. Not really. One of my inspectors was trying to diagram the interactions between these different players under the FOG program. And this was his attempt to do that. And I've kept the slide in my presentations because it's kind of busy. but it also reminds people that there are a lot of players here that are either impacted by your fog program or want to influence how it's implemented. So if you're in a sewer district like we were, your member cities, government agencies, other government agencies, your business office, your budget people, the mayor and city council, your pumpers, if you've got any cogen facilities, your energy recovery folks. These are some of the people that have a vested interest in your fog program. Your ratepayers, they're a huge player in this. They want to know what the benefits are and what the cost is going to be. So you need to keep these folks in the loop. I also talked about making sure that your restaurants, your commercial facilities, they know what they need to do and the consequences of not doing it. You need to make sure that they know what your fog requirements are, that they need to have some kind of an interceptor, that they need to maintain that interceptor with regularly scheduled pump outs. They need to keep records of the pump outs and potentially submit those to you, and that there's potential for enforcement action if they fail to comply with your code, or if they cause a sanitary sewer overflow or a backup or excess line maintenance. They need to know that, because most of them, if they know what they need to do, they're going to try and do it. You may need to provide technical assistance, but keep those folks in mind and make sure that you provide that information to them either through a letter, or when they come into your jurisdiction, you give them a packet of information that has this stuff in it, or flyers, technical assistance, give them some information on doing fog loading calculations so that they can appropriately size their interceptor based on what kind of maintenance schedule they want it to be on. Ken's going to talk about that more later. We have some of those fog calculators linked on our website. There are these fog calculators are almost all of them use the Kennedy Jinx study for grease loading, so they're pretty accurate. Although Ed's going to show you some pictures of some designs that were installed and they didn't quite get up to the expectations on Wednesday. So anyway, I'm curious if we have any questions or comments. And if we don't, Ken, if you're there,
I am here and I do not see any questions.
I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay.
You can take it away.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, we don't. My thing came unplugged.
Okay, well, we are in the home stretch for today. So again, I'm not going to go through all of this. My name is Ken Grimm. I'm the Industry Outreach Manager here at PPRC and for the Western States Alliance. I will say that the picture there is a family hike we took up Burroughs Mountain on Mount Rainier, and to give you an idea, the guy on the right is me, and the two little girls in front of me are now 30. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions about my hair color and weight at this point in time. We want to talk a little bit now about fog triage. You know, you've heard us talk about that and kind of describe that a little bit before, but again, that's going to involve identifying the hot spots, you know, where in your jurisdiction is the grease problem the worst, and why is it bad there? There are many ways to address this, but the easiest way to kind of track this and map it out might be using a GIS technology, which we've showed you in previously, and we'll look at here again in a second. But once you've identified the hot spots, the next step is to look at the food service establishments in that area and kind of rate their fog production. This won't provide all the answers, as you know, some very high fog producers have large well-maintained interceptors, and some medium fog producers have possibly inadequate protection, or maybe their maintenance is not up to snuff. But the majority of the time, high fog producers are high contributors, medium fog producers are medium contributors to the sewer system, et cetera, et cetera. And the last of the 3 steps here for fog triage is to come up with a plan to inspect the food service establishment, talk about effective pretreatment and effective maintenance. You can be working on that plan while you're doing steps 1 and 2, but you'll need to be prepared to discuss what kind of pretreatment might be most effective for that facility and what effective maintenance for that pretreatment would look like. We talked about tracking and particularly GIS mapping to do that. This is another look at what Ed talked to us about earlier. This is a Clean Water Services map of their service area, and you can see the red dots are the quarterly cleaning, the yellow are semi-annual, the green are annual, all of them a far cry from the standard 3 to 5 year cleaning cycle that is ideal for, or is common for most sewer pipes. And when they took a look and they mapped out all of the FSEs in their food service area and overlaid that map on the grease hot spots, you can see that there's a very direct correlation between clusters of areas requiring extra cleaning and clusters of food service establishments. So that was one way to both collect the information and keep the information and track things. It was also a good way to present the information to various stakeholders in a very clear and concise fashion as to why the fog program needs to be implemented and what the anticipated results could be. GIS mapping also can be used for all kinds of things. There's a lot of facilities that use it in different ways. This is a map of Johnson County in Kansas. All of the green dots on the lines are access points. So they know before they ever get out in the field exactly where the manhole covers are. This is City of Seattle, and this is all of the drainage and sewer lines. So it's a really good way to collect and be able to present information. In this particular one, you could put in any address, and that map would take you right to that. It took a lot of time to put that all together, but now they have a very efficient system for tracking whenever they go and make a service call. So we talked about fog production, about the rating facilities as very high, medium, and low. And we also talked about the Kennedy-Jenks brown grease study, which is most commonly used as the basis for that categorization. And so a lot of restaurants, when they went in and took a look at them with this study, they went in with an idea of exactly what they expected that facility to be, which one they whether they thought they would be high, very high, et cetera, et cetera. And they actually have those all listed out as an appendix in the study. It's Appendix C. And if you look here, the full page is page 1 of the facility. It includes the table's 20 pages long altogether, and there are hundreds and hundreds of restaurants that were part of this study. But this includes the initial listing category and a post-study category, which you can see in the magnified snippet, kind of covering that page and most of the right-hand side here. And as you look at it, you can see that a lot of the, for example, the American restaurants were anticipated as high fog producers, but when they actually got out and started measuring them, the vast majority of them were not. There were 45 that were tested, but test results showed that 35 of them came into the medium category. That's about 80% of the restaurants. So the overall designation for that category would come out as medium. Now, the interesting thing about this also, as you can see, is that some of these come out high. And if you look at the restaurant on the right-hand side is one particular chain. So, and also the study can also give you an idea of, you know, which particular chains may or may not run their business such that they have larger contributions than others. And again, you know, some of the baked goods, donut shops were anticipated to be high. Most of them were high. Some of them were very high. But this study was the basis for the categorization tools that we're going to look at on Wednesday to help determine whether it, you know, what level of fog production can be anticipated. And actually, these tools go into pretty good detail and will give you, will allow you to come armed to any sort of inspection with some really concise, scientifically based information on what their anticipated grease production is going to be. So once you've done those things, now you're ready to do the inspection on the food service establishment and do your walkthrough in the facility. So the early on, you'll want to identify where the grease removal device is. If by chance they don't have a grease removal device, then the plan is going to be a little bit different. And we're not going to cover that at the moment for the interests of time. But once you've determined the location, you can visibly inspect the interceptor, determine what kind of condition it's in, find out which fixtures are or are not connected, and how often that is serviced. And you can, you know, that's part of the information you'll need when you look at the rating capacity of the interceptor and the grease production of the facility, using that to establish an effective pump out schedule. And again, as in with the example we gave earlier, you'll want to do that with the restaurant manager if possible. You'll want to do that using the calculators that we'll look at Wednesday, and that it will establish your pump out schedule. And you can actually, you'll be able to do that either based on how often they want to pump it out, and that'll determine what size interceptor you want, or how often before it has to be pumped out based on the grease production they have. So we're going to talk a little bit next about best management practices in the kitchen. But before we do, we have another one of Krista's polls.
All righty. Does your city or utility allow staff to conduct FSC fog inspections? Okay, almost everyone voted, so I'm going to close it. Any comments, guys?
It would be interesting for those people who've said no, is if few of those people could say, why won't the city allow them to do a fog inspection? I'd be interested to hear that reason.
Yeah.
Thank you, Krista.
Yeah, but particularly a clarification between whether there's, you know, there's some restriction in the sewer use ordinance, or whether or not there even is a sewer use ordinance.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken.
All right. Do we want to do one more?
Yes.
All right. Does your city or utility rely heavily on fog best management practices? Okay. I'm gonna close it. Any comments?
That's a, in terms of that being a major part of your program, excuse me, that's one of the smaller numbers we've seen. And as we continue on through this and talk about that next, I think you'll see why why it's a good idea that that's not a huge part of your program.
Good point. All right. Take it away.
Okay. So best kitchen practices, when we talk about best management practices and programs, they're pretty much everywhere now. They're in pollution prevention programs and sustainability programs, other types of green business programs or business improvement programs, et cetera, et cetera. And they're incorporated in many ways in our world today. So why do we call best kitchen practices a myth that must be busted? It's first of all to kind of get your attention, but also because despite the fact that there are some good things about kitchen best practices, there are also some real problems that if you're putting your program together or looking to enhance your program, you'll probably want to take into account with this, and that is that in a perfect world, best management practices would obviously keep significant quantities of fog from entering the sewer system. You can see them here scraping the plates before they go through the dishwasher. Doing that and wiping the grease from every source would reduce the fog discharge to the collection system. It would reduce the fog that made its way to the interceptor, so it would reduce the maintenance frequency, and it would save money both short and long term. Unfortunately, there is quite a difference between the real world and our perfect world rather, and real world. In the real world, cleanup staff are always in a big hurry. I've never seen a kitchen where the dishwasher wasn't working at a fairly consistent, if not furious pace. They're doing everything they can to get cookware and tableware cleaned up and returned to service as fast as possible, and they're doing it over and over again throughout the service day as people come and go. So at the end of the day, cleanup is usually performed by fairly tired staff, given minimal amount of time to do the job. The fastest way to clean them is like you see here on the right-hand side, just grabbing that overhead sprayer with high pressure water and hosing it into the sink. When they clean up the floors, the easiest way is to just squeegee that right down the nearest floor drain, and that's frequently what happens. Or sometimes, and Clayton noted that in his example, out the door and into the nearest drain out in the street or in the parking lot. Also, the food service manager's responsibility is chiefly about getting good food onto the customer's table. That's their whole purpose. That's the whole purpose of the restaurant being there. So, overseeing daily operations, hiring and training staff, coordinating schedules, planning menus, ordering supplies, dealing with unhappy customers and resolving their complaints are all things that are in their daily life that come before kitchen best management practices for the FSE manager. They also have budget constraints to operate within, reports to submit, revenue goals to meet, regulatory compliance to worry about, particularly with health department if there's inspections coming up. So, for these and other reasons, staff best management practice training is frequently delegated to a more tenured employee in the same area, i.e. the dishwasher that's been there the longest is training the new people on what best management practices are. And that may or may not be effective, and there may or may not be follow-up on the training by either the restaurant manager or that more tenured employee. The other issue with the best management practices in the kitchen is that restaurants are one of the 2 highest sectors in the country for turnover rate. This particular graph you're looking at here is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the blue is restaurant and accommodations sector, so that would include hotels, etc. And the red is the total U.S. private sector. So you can see that, certainly for the last 4 or 5 years, that the turnover rate is about 75%. And what the chart doesn't show is that the turnover rate for cooks and certain other restaurant staff is lower than that, which means that the turnover rate among dishwashing staff is higher. In a lot of cases, it's more like 100%. And there are some FSCs out there have reported that that they have a 200% or higher than 200% turnover rate, which means that, they have to train a new employee at least 2 or 3 times a year into the kitchen best management practices understanding. Also with kitchen best management practices, there is a wide variety out there, and you're not going to be able to train everybody on everything. You're not going to be able to list them out, or it'll eventually just become wallpaper and nobody will notice it anymore. This slide here and the next 3 that follow are a collection of best management practices that we're either aware of or a cursory search over the internet has come up with from various FOG programs, restaurant associations, independent contractors, etc. And a lot of them are pretty universal, like scraping pots and pans before washing, not dumping oil directly down the sink, that sort of thing. And then some like these, post no grease signs, et cetera, are fairly common. And then there are some that are a little less universal, like ensuring that wastewater from duct cleaning gets routed through the interceptor. Well, that's something that doesn't happen on a regular basis, and as often as not gets totally overlooked. But it's something that's important, because whenever you clean those ranges, you're moving out a lot of really, really heavily fog-laden wash water. So, the other thing is there are variations like screen all wastewater flows to prevent solids from entering the interceptor. Things like maintain a written log of on-site grease interceptor cleaning and maintenance, which frequently is a regulatory compliance requirement, but also frequently does not happen. So, keep in mind with all this that, you're not going to be able to train, new kitchen staff over and over and over again on all of these things. So you have to select what would be the most effective, or certainly the most effective in your estimation for your program, and then keep the list at that. The larger the list, the more likely at some time all of it or some of it will be enforced less stringently by the food service establishment. You also occasionally run into the fact that sometimes the FSC does not own the interceptor or pay for the maintenance. For example, sometimes you see that in strip malls or food courts sometimes, where the costs of that are buried into the lease agreement, and they don't consider that their problem. And it's particularly not their problem because it's buried into the lease agreement. They're already paying for it. They're not getting a benefit out of addressing that. And so you have that issue to also run across. And so this is a look at a particular line. This is on a high fog producing line. All of the restaurants on this line had to have kitchen best management practices implemented, and they're regularly inspected, and they have regularly scheduled interceptor maintenance. So this is a look 3 months after the public line cleaning, and we'll do that now.
Position 5 to 7 o'clock. Comments, Gleason 5.
So you can see on this all of the fog buildup from the discharge. This particular one is dumping in from overhead, and you're getting buildup on the wall from splatter, and you're also seeing buildup on the sides of it. And you're looking now down at a section of that sewer pipe that was replaced prior to this the 3 months, that was replaced right after the public line cleaning when they found problems. So again, this is a high fog producing line, and this is 3 months after best management practices were implemented. So you can see that their effectiveness, it may be much worse without them, but as a major tool in your toolbox, they're lacking some performance. So what does that mean? Does that mean we need to get out of the kitchen training and because there's nothing good about best management practices? I hope that's not the takeaway from this, because that's not quite what we're trying to let everybody know. We do want, one of the things about kitchen best management practices is, as we say, they are one of the tools in the toolbox, and as such, they are actually your first line of defense against fog. Your last line of defense is the interceptor. BMPs are your first line of defense, and they can make a difference. They can't make the major difference, but they can make a difference. They can help control costs a bit. They have the most resources available to download and print, particularly resources for ESL employees. You'll see this in a variety of sources. Most major municipal areas have fog resources for FSEs. The National Restaurant Association has got a collection of best management practices, brochures and posters that you can download, print out, and post yourself. And they have a lot of them, again, in other languages. And BMPs can also help perpetuate at least somewhat a cultural consciousness about fats, oils, and grease and the problem in general. So there are some good things about kitchen best management practices. We just call it a myth that must be busted, because it's not really effective as the major tool in your effort to reduce fog. This is one of those posters that's available for download. I put this up as an example because I particularly like this one. A lot of them are of the no with an arrow through it variety. This one juxtaposes that with the right way to do things. So you can see both in 3 different languages, both what not to do as well as what to do. And I think that's very helpful as well. So as a major part of your program, what takes the place then of best management practices? So we come back to, and I hope this hasn't become beating a dead horse for you, but we come back to connecting all fixtures and drains in the food service area to an interceptor. It is just such a significant improvement. Ed's going to expound on that a little further, and also come up again with the chart that showed the 4 representative samples of the testing that was done after the retrofits before that. pretty clearly show that there's a significant benefit to tying in all fixtures and drains. And I think they also, it would be hard to argue that best management practice could achieve that same thing. So I believe it is my time to pass this over to Ed. So Ed.
Here I am, and give it to me, Ken.
All right, it is coming and it is yours.
All right, thank you. And let me pop this up here a little bit. All right, guys, you guys already know who I am, so I'm going to skip on down to the next page. Yep. Effective pre-treatment. Yes, removal of fog is pre-treatment. Now, you guys kind of might remember on my introductory slide when I said I spent many years as industrial pre-treatment compliance. Yeah, a couple of thoughts come to my mind, and just keep coming back to me. And in fact, I even almost apply the same philosophy to my personal life. It's like, after doing numerous industrial inspections, I found when a company that keeps pre-treatment programs simple but efficient, things go problem-free. Simpler things are, the less problems they are. And I personally think the same concept applies to fog management. The simpler, the better, the far less problems. That's right, it's a simple concept. Simple, it's better. It's when the simple concept is when you have all the fixtures and drains from a food service area connected to an appropriately sized interceptor. That's very easy. Everything that produces grease that's in the kitchen, hook it up to an interceptor. Then that's very simple and very uncomplicated. Yeah, simple, right? Yeah, but from my words to your ears and to the planning department, everything gets, all of a sudden, everything gets complicated. For the first part, money. And for the second part, the cost. Third part, cash. Once again, it's all about the money. But when you talk to a plumber and you're building a brand new structure, he'll agree with you. It doesn't take much more effort or budget to connect all fixtures and drains to a common drain line that flows to an appropriately sized interceptor. However, the capacity and the size does matter. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Understand the connection between the size and the maintenance cost. And once again, not surprisingly, whenever you brand new restaurants being built and they go ahead and ask for a contracted bid for a bid, and when those bids involved, capital cost is always a consideration, not the maintenance cost. So when you consider maintenance in conjunction with the capital cost, the better designed interceptor, the more efficient, and the location may cost a little more, but in the long run, it's going to be cheaper and problem-free. Retrofits is kind of a separate little discussion. Looking at the time here, see how fast we are. I'm just going to kind of go in detail in some of these slides that just kind of summarize this one here. Is that here's a restaurant that it has the HDI there. You can see in the top left-hand corner. And this is where it's just connected to the 3-compartment sink. What would happen? What would happen if you move this 3-compartment sink? Well, let me tell you what. Once again, if you ask a plumbing inspectors, most plumbing inspectors say the only thing you need to do, plumbers and plumbing inspectors, it's not unusual, as most is the wrong word to use. It would not be unusual for them to say the only thing that's important is to connect the 3-compartment sink. But you know that, we've talked about this before, is the idea that the only grease comes out of a facility is from a 3-compartment sink is wrong. Is wrong. We know there's a lot more grease that comes out from the facility, besides the 3-compartment sink. But tell you what, here's the next slide. I'm going to watch the HDI that's up there in the top right corner, and let's move it to the outside to a GGI. What's interesting about this is we didn't really change much plumbing on the inside. However, what we did is we rerouted the plumbing that came from the restrooms, moved it on the downstream side of the grease interceptor. Voila, all of a sudden you have everything in the restaurant connected to a properly sized grease interceptor. And you can even, this doesn't even have to be a gravity grease interceptor. It could be a hydromechanical, one that's properly designed and could catch the flow that comes out of this facility. Once again, you need to evaluate the flow with the size of the interceptor. But the point I'm just trying to make here is that you don't have to do much to the inside of a restaurant. All you have to do is think about the positioning of the HGI or the GGI or gravity grease interceptor or hydromechanical device. Understand where it is. And you can see it isn't much more complicated than moving it to the outside. And once again, I think it captures a whole lot more grease coming out of your facility. This is just another. Krista, I'm surprised. Do we have a polling slide here? Want to just do one of the polls?
Sure. Let's do it fast though. Take this fast,
Let's just do
guys.
one poll
How
and then
many
let's call it
FSCs
quits.
have most or all fixtures
I can
and
barely hear
drains?
you, Krista.
How many FSCs have most or all fixtures and drains discharging to an interceptor? Okay. Try to take it. I'm going to close it. All right.
All right.
There we go.
That's pretty nice. Yeah.
Good to see both sessions today having
yeah.
more than 20%. So
Yeah, that's very
that's
good. Glad to hear that. I'm going to go ahead and let's just do one slide and let's move it on, okay? All right, here we go.
And just a comment from someone saying that basically they've never done a fog inspection. And they don't even
really?
know if they're getting done. Oh.
Well, I
That's
hope some of
scary.
the information we showed you on the value of doing fog inspection, it's going to be an eye opener for them the next Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, when we do the last session of our webinar. You can see a lot of the things you're going to see when you do a fog inspection. I hope you enjoyed next Wednesday's presentation. Here, I'm just going to kind of just to summarize this one up pretty well. This slide right here, all it's saying is that here's a gravity grease interceptor that's on the inside. It's the position of capturing most of the grease. But if you instead of having the grease interceptor on the inside, put it on the outside of the building. So when you move that particular grease interceptor to the outside, what's the value of that? That means the grease company can come there any time of the day or night to pump it out. Also, if any of you have been and done a grease inspection and watched the pump out when the hydromechanical device opened up inside that restaurant, there is a lot of opinions about the smell. So think about where that hose has been, where that equipment has been, and when it's inside the restaurant, if you move it to the outside, it's a whole lot easier for the grease pumping company and a whole lot better for the workers inside the building. This slide here, Ken's going to talk a lot more about it, but just to summarize, when you have all the fixtures and drains connected to an appropriately sized interceptor, you'll end up reducing the amount of grease that's being discharged to the collection system. In fact, you'll capture 10 times the amount of grease. And what I'm going to do is basically one quick slide. There is a lot of public outreach material out there. There's a lot of information for individuals as far as, once again, you'll see them on the website. You'll see there's multiple places on the web. Also, we have information available here for you guys. Also, there's a lot of information that's also available for the commercial fog generators, the FSCs or the food service establishments, including we have an excellent fog booklet. So once again, that information is available to you. With that, knowing that this 2 hours is up here, I'm going to turn it over to Clayton so we can wrap it up. So Clayton Brown, It's all yours.
Thanks, Ed.
Uh-huh. Gotcha.
Well, folks, we're almost done. This is the summary of the agenda that we wanted to go over today. I think we did a pretty good job. I'm sure you'll let us know during the surveys and course evaluations. On Wednesday, this is the stuff that we're going to cover: effective pretreatment, sizing, design improvements, testing by third parties for the grease interceptors so that you can pick one that's been tested, or assist your client in picking one, field investigations and inspections, tons and tons of pictures and stories by Ed Gilmore tomorrow, or on Wednesday. And then a wee bit at the end on data acquisition and management. So it's going to be fun. This is the stuff we covered today. I'm going to skip that one. This is the website that we keep talking about, Western States Alliance Training. This is the one that has all of the documentation information that we've shared with you today, and where you can pull down a lot more information. We keep adding to it also. So keep coming back, see what else is new. And this is us. So Krista, I think we're done for the day, and we'll start over again on Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, thanks everyone. If you have any questions, again, feel free to visit our website or send us an email.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna close it out. So thanks,
All right.
guys.
Bye-bye,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
See you Wednesday.
See you Wednesday.